What's up guys, MikeCoco back here, bringing you guys a first impressions video on Dark Avenger Sarah. She is the first Season 8 hero available to free players, and she is a very good hero, just right off the bat. In many ways very similar to Lacita, and you will know why soon. So her skill is a column skill, and it provides an attack debuff and an attack buff. The attack debuff is capped at 40%, but interestingly, the attack buff is uncapped, so it goes all the way up to 75% compared to the usual capped 50%. Now, the last hero I believe that had an attack buff aside from Prince Arthur was actually Sir Cromwell, and his attack buff was capped at 50%. So that's why this 75% attack buff is very interesting. Because in many ways, Dark Avenger Sarah can be seen as a replacement to Lacita, because and I'm just going to go into the preview really quick. She basically trades off the stun for an attack debuff, and in the current modes now, an attack debuff is much more useful than a stun because all the bosses are immune to controls such as stuns, silences, bewitches, so an attack debuff actually does help more than a stun in this case. And you can see here that it does decrease the attack by 40% and increases her own attack by 50%, which when she gets to a level 100 will be uncapped at 75%. Now, Dark Avenger Sarah is similar to Lacita, but not exactly the same. Her myth skill is different. It's actually quite worse than Lacita's. It only provides EXP instead of increased damage to bosses. But do note that Dark Avenger Sarah does use a bow, which means that she does more damage than Lacita because guns inherently are weaker than bows. And not only that, Dark Avenger Sarah is of Season 8, and she has roughly 17k agility at 6 star. And when you take a look at Lacita at 6 star, she only has 3 or 13k agility, so that's like a 3k difference. Um, 3k, no, actually closer to a 4k difference. So if we expect Dark Avenger Sarah to have similar stats to even the main hero at Season 8, who has 50k agility at Season 8, you can definitely expect, plus the myth skill, she'll have somewhere closer to 56 55k or maybe even 60k agility, which is a good healthy 10k agility more than Lacita at level 100 EX max level myth. And so this 10k increase in agility might actually make up for the fact that her myth skill is worse. Um, so because I don't have Dark Avenger Sarah right now, I can't compare on whether or not Lacita deals more damage because of her myth skill, or if the trade-off of stats does help Dark Avenger Sarah make up for the lack of increased damage to bosses. But it is safe to say that Dark Avenger Sarah is very similar to Lacita, and in many ways is a very good hero, especially for for a secondary team where Lacita dies, especially in Explore or as a SOS bring in Mythic Raid, because they act so similarly. You can use them in pretty much any situation because you can just substitute one for the other. So in that way, Dark Avenger Sarah is very good. Now, going on to the Mythic hero that was released alongside DAS, we have Metatron. Metatron is a cannon user, which is not that great because cannons have inconsistent damage. My Pram hits somewhere between 1 mil and like 16 mil, so it's like extremely inconsistent. You never know how much she's going to hit, so it's kind of like a flip of a coin, except it's a flip of many coins. But her myth skill is actually quite important to her damage because it increases her minimum damage. So right off the bat, it makes her deal a lot more damage because it boosts the lower bound of her damage, meaning that she hits much more consistently. Now at level 1, this myth skill raises the minimum damage by 75%, and assuming it goes by somewhere around increments of maybe 15, 25%, at level 4 you could see somewhere around 150% to 200% increase in minimum damage, which is absolutely fantastic because, and I'm going to use Pram as an example because I don't have a very well geared cannon hero. Pram at level 100 EX myth has a lower bound of 200k for their attack. Now, if you increase that by 150%, it's basically the same thing as multiplying that by 1.5 times. So that's roughly around, or is it? No, 2.5 times. So that's roughly around 400, 400, maybe 450,000 attack. So that's around 450k if my math is correct. Let me think. Increases by 100% is equivalent to multiplying it by 2. So yeah, somewhere if we expect the mythic skill to be around 150% at level 4, it is around a 2.5 times increase in attack. So it's somewhere around 450k, maybe 500k. And that's just with the myth skill alone. Now if we take a look back at a Metatron, her own skill actually deals or applies a minimum damage buff as well. We're going to look at it really quick here, but I'm going to go into preview. Her skill is a 300 Fury, unfortunately, but it does increase her minimum damage by a certain percentage, by 100% at level 50. Now, I'm not sure if this is capped at 100%. It would make sense if it was capped at 100% because uncapping it would be tremendously overpowered, I think. Um, so using the skill increases her own attack by minimum attack by 100%. So before, with the myth skill applied, her lower bound is 500k based on the calculations of Pram. Now we increase it by another 100%, so we're now increasing the minimum damage by 250%, which is equivalent to multiplying it by 3.5 times. 200k times 3.5 times is 700k for your lower bound. And remember that cannons have very high upper bound damage. So Metatron is going to be dealing tons of damage at this point because the minimum bound has been raised so much that it pretty much exceeds or comes very close to the more consistent agility or ranged users such as the guns and the bows, but they still have the very high upper bound, so they still have the potential to hit much harder than the gun and bow users. So in this case, the worst case scenario would be Metatron hitting similar to the gun and the bow users, but the best case scenario is Metatron hitting much harder because of the inherent cannon damage range. And so I'm just gonna skip this skill. We can see how much damage she does. So it's 29 damage, so what was that, 26 I think, or it's 20, yeah, 26 damage. So when we apply the skill, let's apply it over here, we'll see how much her damage raises by. Although, oh, actually we can't tell because she guarantees a critical on her next turn, but her minimum attack is raised by a lot, just by calculating it, and because her next skill is always a critical, it just means she's going to be dealing much more damage than normal. And do note that this minimum attack increase is actually a buff. It's this red icon here. It's not like a passive buff, so you actually have to keep maintaining this buff, otherwise it would disappear, which is unfortunate because her skill does cost 300 Fury, so that's quite a bit of Fury. You're definitely going to need a few good Fury Thieves in order to use her skill consistently. So, and you definitely want her skill to be set to always use because you always want to have that increased lower bound of damage. Now, the second negative aspect to Metatron is that her skill is in the 3x3 area. Now, the only other 3x3 myths are Remy and Uriel. And for Remy, I know her SDF is 1.69. I'm not sure about Uriel, but most 3x3s have a 1.69 SDF. So it might mean that she hits less hard compared to the other mythic heroes, but because of the cannon's damage range, it might make up for it. So Metatron is actually quite a good hero. If her SDF is higher than the typical 3x3s, then she's going to deal a lot more damage. Otherwise, I would expect her to deal fairly good damage compared to most of these mythic heroes. Probably, I can't really compare because I don't have any of them, but I would say the damage is still decent. So that's pretty much it. Recap, Dark Avenger Sarah, definitely worth trying to get for. She's very good. Suitable for a secondary team, and Metatron, obviously, as you can see from the calculations, is also a very good hero. So that's pretty much it for this first impressions, guys. Peace.